Shut down every bank card, change every password, and leave your house immediately, if you still want to live." The technician whispered that into my ear right after he removed the back cover of the phone I had brought in to get fixed for my daughter-in-law. I froze because on the screen was a wide-open secret folder, Exit Strategy, HM. Then came a chain of messages describing in detail how to kill me without leaving evidence. And the most horrifying part, the person discussing this plan was no one other than my own son, Brandon. I swallowed hard. In that moment, I understood that if I wanted to survive, I had to fight back, quietly, wisely, and faster than they moved. Because what I had just seen was only the tip of a deadly iceberg. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I stood motionless in the tiny repair shop filled with the smell of hot soldering glue, squeezed between an old dry cleaner and a souvenir store. It was South Lamar in Austin, a place I had walked through countless times in nearly 40 years of living in the city. But never once had it made my heart tremble the way it did that morning. I, Helen Morris, 68 years old, a retired high school teacher, should have been at home brewing coffee for my husband, Samuel, just like every morning. Instead, I was standing in a repair shop barely bigger than a kitchen cabinet, my hand still shaking as I gripped the old leather purse my daughter gave me last year. "Mrs. Helen, you need to see this." Gavin, the young technician in his early 30s, spoke with a strained voice. His eyes kept darting over my shoulder as if he feared someone might be standing behind me. I remembered he was usually cheerful, always joking about Austin FC, but today his face was pale. I leaned in as Gavin turned the phone screen toward me. I saw a familiar messaging app with a hidden folder marked by a faint icon. Exit Strategy. HM. Just those last two letters, HEM, made my stomach twist. M was me, Helen Morris. I tapped the screen lightly and the messages opened. The lines, the plans, the cold, calculated instructions I never thought my son, the child I raised, protected, and carried to school, could ever write. If she starts getting confused more often, everything gets easier. Don't worry, the medical records will match. I already talked to the doctor. When the time comes, just say it was an accident. My chest tightened. I heard my own breathing, shallow and shaky, as if it belonged to someone else. No, this can't be," I whispered. Gavin braced himself against the counter, trying to stay calm. "Your daughter-in-law brought the phone in this morning, said she dropped it. When I checked it, this folder popped up. I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. I have a mom at home. I know how that feels. I can't let something like this happen to you." His words snapped me out of my shock. I looked at the screen again, looked at the sender and the receiver. Sender, Lydia. Receiver, Brandon. Two people I had trusted completely for the 12 years they'd been together. My fists tightened until my knuckles turned white. I had to breathe slowly to keep myself from collapsing. "Gavin, please restore the phone to the way it was. Don't leave a trace." My voice surprised me. It sounded sharp, clear, almost like it belonged to someone stronger than I was. Gavin nodded immediately. "I'll make sure they never know what I saw." For the next half hour, I sat on the wooden bench by the door, staring at the traffic outside, feeling like I stood between two worlds. The old world I used to live in, peaceful and familiar, and a new, terrifying world where my own son wanted me gone. By the time Gavin handed the fully restored phone back to me, I had already made my decision. It made my hands tremble, but inside me rose something I thought I had lost long ago, the instinct to protect myself. "I saved everything," I said. Gavin nodded, still worried. "Please be careful. If they're willing to do this to you, they won't stop." I knew he was right, and I knew that one careless move would mean Samuel and I might never get the chance to fight back. I left the shop with steps heavy as stone, gripping Lydia's phone like it was a bomb ready to explode. Austin was sunny that day, with the live oak trees rustling, an old, familiar sound I loved for decades since moving to Texas. But that morning, everything felt cold, as if I were walking through a world that no longer belonged to me. I drove home slower than usual. Every turn, every storefront, every white picket fence in our Brentwood neighborhood, everything looked foreign. I passed the red mailbox Samuel had just repainted last month and remembered how Brandon helped him fix its base when he was a teenager. A beautiful memory. Now painful. When I parked in the driveway, my hands were still shaking. I sat for a few moments staring at the kitchen window where Samuel would be pouring water into the coffee machine right about now. I took a deep breath. I had to tell him. I had to start with the 3 words I feared most. Brandon betrayed us. Samuel stepped outside just as I opened the back door to grab my purse. He wore the navy sweater I knitted for him 2 years ago. His hair had grown grayer. Time had not been gentle. He smiled lightly. "You were gone a while, Helen. I thought you stopped by the grocery store." I pressed my lips together. "Sam, I need to talk to you. Let's go inside first." Once inside, I locked the door. Samuel frowned. I set my bag on the table, opened my phone, and pulled up the photos of the messages from Lydia's phone, each one captured with my own trembling hands. "Sam, I'm sorry, but you need to see this." It took only seconds for his face to shift from curiosity, shock, denial, and finally a deep, piercing pain that almost made me want to pull him into my arms. But he stepped back, needing space to breathe. "Helen, no, this can't. Brandon wouldn't." I shook my head slowly. I didn't understand it either. I didn't want to understand it. But the truth was right there. Every line, every detail, every cold calculation. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't someone hacking the phone. This was real. And I, who once held Brandon as a newborn, who cheered him on through every school year, who packed his lunch every morning, was now looking at proof that my son wanted me gone. I collapsed onto the sofa, my legs barely holding me up. Samuel sat beside me, gripping my hand. His hand was ice cold. "What do we do now, Helen?" I looked out the window at the late morning Texas sunlight reflecting off the framed landscape painting I'd hung 10 years ago. I knew right then, if we didn't act immediately, there might not be a tomorrow. "Sam," I met his eyes. "We have to stay calm, act normal, pretend we don't know anything, and we must move faster than they do." I had never spoken so decisively in my life. Samuel didn't answer, but he squeezed my hand, his silent promise. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing. I would not let myself die quietly in the home I built with my own hands. Samuel sat still beside me, his once steady hands trembling slightly. I looked at him and felt as if I were watching a cliffside start to crumble under the wind. The man who had been my safe place for 45 years now looked as if someone had drained all the life from him in minutes. I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. "Sam, I'm sorry you had to see this." He inhaled deeply, releasing it slowly as if trying to rebuild the world collapsing around him. Helen, I don't understand. Why? What did we do wrong? His voice cracked. I had no answers. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into our bank account. I thought I was too shaken to handle numbers, but fear had made me painfully alert. Transaction history loaded on the screen. And then, line after line appeared. Small withdrawals, $50, $120, sometimes $300 once a week. Then a few transfers to an unfamiliar account labeled M. Hartley, a name neither of us had ever heard. In total, more than $8,000 gone in the past 2 months. My chest tightened. Sam, look. He leaned closer. His eyes widened, then narrowed, studying every number. Did Brandon do this? He asked, even though he already knew. I pressed my lips together. He's the only one with access. Remember last year when I had knee surgery? He said it would be easier to pay medical bills if we signed temporary authorization. Then you got COVID. Everything was chaotic. We never revoked the authorization. Samuel rubbed his forehead. Oh my God. We sat in silence. A part of me wanted to believe Brandon had borrowed the money because he was struggling. But after seeing those messages in Lydia's phone, that hope died quickly. Samuel stood and paced across the living room. He always paced when stressed, but this time his steps were unsteady. When did he become this person? I leaned back, fingers gripping the edge of a pillow. A long time ago, Sam. We just refused to see it. I wasn't blaming him. I wasn't blaming myself. I was speaking to the empty air, maybe to the years we spent ignoring the signs. I remembered the small changes over the years. Brandon calling less, asking more about finances, paying too much attention to my medications, asking strange questions about my memory, my habits, my doctor visits. Lydia, too. Every question now echoed like a needle in my bones. I closed my eyes. Sam, this wasn't sudden. He's been planning this. Samuel stopped pacing. For money. He said it like a verdict. I didn't answer, but silence was the confirmation. We sat side by side, each holding a laptop. Something rare. I logged into every account and changed the passwords. Samuel called the bank to freeze every supplemental card Brandon had access to. We once trusted him enough to let him withdraw money when needed. Now, the thought made me sick. After the call, Samuel set the phone down and leaned back. It's done. Everything is locked. I nodded. We also need to change our email passwords, insurance accounts, and Social Security login. The words tasted bitter. Protecting ourselves from our own son. It took almost an hour to secure everything. When I finished the final password, I felt a slight relief, like closing another door against a storm. I went to the kitchen for water. When I opened the medicine cabinet, I froze. Several bottles I had never seen before were there, labels unfamiliar. But the doctor's name was not Dr. Wallace. The family doctor Brandon insisted we switch to because it was convenient for everyone. My heart pounded faster. Sam, come here. He walked in, frowning at the bottles. Did you take any of these? Of course not. I don't have any condition that needs prescription meds. I checked the list again. Mild sedatives, anti-anxiety pills, memory support medication, and some items I couldn't identify even with my basic medical knowledge. My knees weakened. Sam. This is why Lydia kept asking about my memory, why Brandon asked if I took my meds on time. Samuel held a bottle, his jaw clenched. They wanted your records to show cognitive decline. The words stabbed deeper than any poison. It wasn't the threat of illness. It was the betrayal. I sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped tightly. Sam, we have to stay quiet. They can't know we discovered this. He nodded. If they know, they'll try something else. I forced my breath to steady. We'll watch everything, every move, every transaction, and we must act normal, like nothing happened. Samuel stared at me for a long moment. All of this is beyond anything I could ever imagine, Helen. I gave him a tired smile. Beyond anything I could imagine, too. I looked out the window. The Texas afternoon sun had turned golden, landing on the polished wooden dining table. This house was once our sanctuary, where we brought Brandon home from the hospital, where we raised him, where we celebrated birthdays and holidays. Now, every corner felt like it could be hiding a threat. I whispered almost to myself, "My son really wants me dead." Samuel reached out and held my hand, firm and steady. "You're not alone, Helen. We'll figure this out. And we'll live." I looked at him. Yes, we still had each other. We still had a chance. We still had a reason to fight. I took a deep breath. "Sam, from this moment on, don't let them see anything change, not even a little." He nodded, resolute. "I promise." That night, I couldn't sleep. Samuel lay beside me, breathing evenly, though I knew he probably didn't rest much either. I stared at the ceiling, memories of Brandon as a child flashing one by one, running in the backyard, clinging to me on his first day of school, crying in my arms after his first heartbreak, smiling wide the day he brought Lydia home to meet us. All those memories, those moments any mother would cherish, had now become shards of glass cutting into my heart. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling an unsteady rhythm. The betrayal of an outsider can make you angry, but the betrayal of the very child you raised has the power to break your soul. And in the darkness of the bedroom, I made a vow to myself I would not let my son decide my fate. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brandon's little boy face, innocent, quick, full of life, overlapping with the adult man now plotting to take his own mother's life. The contrast hurt so much it made my breath catch. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I sat at the wooden table by the window, holding a cup of hot coffee without taking a sip. Samuel walked into the kitchen, his silver hair slightly messy from a sleepless night. He placed his hand on my shoulder without saying a word, but I knew he carried the same weight I did. We sat in silence for nearly 10 minutes before my phone rang. The caller ID showed Brandon. I looked at Samuel. He gave a small nod, tension in his eyes. I answered. "Hi, Mom," Brandon said with an oddly cheerful tone. "Lydia and I thought we'd come over for dinner tonight. It's been a while since we ate together." Hearing those words sent a chill down my spine. A surprise dinner? At a time like this? There was no way this was a coincidence. I forced my voice to stay calm. Sure. I don't have any plans. 6 o'clock? Perfect. I want you to try this new wine. You're gonna love it. I could hear Lydia's soft laugh in the background. When Brandon hung up, I set the phone down, my hand ice cold. Samuel sat across from me. "What do you think?" "Tonight, that will be a test. They want to see how we react." He nodded slowly. "We need to get ready." I opened the small kitchen drawer and took out the tiny voice recorder, no larger than a thumb, that Samuel used for noting home repairs. We put fresh batteries in and tested it. The sound was clear and crisp. I crouched under the dining table and taped the recorder neatly beneath the tabletop with clear tape. When I stood up, Samuel gripped my shoulders, worry shining in his eyes. "Helen, there are kids. I still can't believe it." I cupped his cheek gently. "I can't believe it either. but we have to do what needs to be done. That afternoon, I made a simple dinner, not because I didn't want to cook, but because I didn't have the strength to stand in the kitchen for long. Ordinary moments, chopping onions, adding salt, tossing salad, suddenly felt unbearably heavy, as if every motion reminded me that my reality had fractured. Right at 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Brandon walked in holding a small bouquet. Lydia followed behind him with a cheesecake box and a bottle of red wine. They looked like the picture-perfect young Austen couple, friendly, successful, polite. No one looking from the outside would ever imagine they were planning to get rid of his parents to take their assets. I forced myself to smile. "You're here. Come in." Lydia stepped forward and hugged me, just a little too tightly. "Are you feeling okay lately? You look a little tired." That question, emphasizing tired, stabbed like ice. She was starting with the tactic most familiar to her, planting the idea that I was declining. I smiled softly. "Old age, dear." Brandon went to greet Samuel with a warm-sounding tone, but I caught the quick glance he shot at my face, observing, checking, like he was looking for signs of weakness. We sat down at the table. I poured water, and Lydia immediately opened the wine. "You have to try this. They say older adults sleep better with a glass." A sentence that sounded caring enough, but each word felt like a needle. I glanced at Samuel. He gave the slightest shake of his head, so small only I could notice. Lydia poured my glass so full it passed the point of courtesy. When I didn't reach for it, she smiled. "Did you forget? You love red wine, don't you?" I looked directly into her eyes. "I remember, but tonight I want to stay alert." A flicker of confusion flashed in her eyes. Just 1 second, but enough to know I had brushed against the surface of their plan. Throughout dinner, Lydia kept asking questions that made my skin crawl. "Have you ever forgotten to turn off the stove? Do you remember your checkup schedule? Do you mix up your medications sometimes?" Every question wrapped in honey, but inside were sharp hooks. I pretended to be absent-minded at times, smiling lightly, glancing at Samuel as if confused, all an act. Inside, I memorized every word. Brandon watched me with unsettling precision. He studied how I picked up my food, how I held my spoon, whether my hand trembled. His eyes carried the cold calculation of someone waiting for his prey to slip. Then he smiled warmly. "You know, Mom, Lydia and I toured this really great assisted living place up north. They have a pool, physical therapy, even an art room. If you and Dad move there, it'd be easier for doctors to keep track. And honestly, you two are at that age where you shouldn't have to handle everything yourselves anymore." Every word raised the hair on the back of my neck. I answered gently, I'll think about it." Brandon leaned back. "You should look soon. A lot of people miss their chance if they wait too long." Samuel set his spoon down a bit harder than usual. "We can handle ourselves. When we need help, I'll say so." Brandon chuckled awkwardly, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Lydia looked at Samuel with a hint of disappointment, like he'd ruined a line in the script. Then came the circling questions again. Medicine schedules, neurology checkups, whether I had trouble sleeping, all questions that seemed caring, until you viewed the larger picture. They were trying to build a foundation for a cognitive decline diagnosis. I answered each one evenly, not too sharp, not too forgetful. Inside, I felt a cold wave rising. Around 8:30, Brandon stood to clear the plates. He looked completely at ease, while Lydia chatted about work and bonuses like everything was normal. As they prepared to leave, Lydia hugged me tightly again. "Remember to take your medicine before bed. It's good for memory." I gave her a thin smile. Yes, dear, I remember. Brandon kissed my cheek, a gesture he hadn't done in years. I love you, Mom, he said. I stood still, not crying, not replying, just watching him walk out the door with the feeling that I was standing in the middle of a storm with no end in sight. When the door closed, Samuel immediately went to the dining table and checked the recorder. Still running, still capturing every word, I leaned back against the wall. Everything I had suppressed throughout dinner surged up all at once. I couldn't hold it anymore. I slid down to the floor, covered my face, and broke into tears. Samuel sat beside me and wrapped his arm around my shoulders. You did so well, Helen. You're stronger than you think. I buried my face against his chest, my tears soaking into his old sweater. Sam, what if I hadn't been alert tonight? What if I drank the wine? What if I let my guard down? Sam, tonight could have been my last night. My voice cracked like dry wood snapping. Samuel held me tighter. No, we're still here. We still have each other. We're going to get through this. I closed my eyes and let myself cry like a child, because I knew if I hadn't been cautious, if I hadn't listened to Gavin, if I hadn't seen those messages, this dinner might have been a goodbye I didn't know I was making. When the tears finally subsided, I squeezed Samuel's hand. Tomorrow, we move to the next step, more carefully, and we keep pretending, just like tonight. He nodded, eyes steady. Absolutely. I looked at the dining table, 2 chairs slightly out of place, 2 glasses of wine still half full, untouched. A dinner that looked ordinary, hiding a darkness you couldn't see. I stood up and took a deep breath. Sam, we won't let them succeed, not ever. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, but it couldn't warm the fear inside me. I could still hear every sentence from last night, each one a cold needle. Samuel made coffee and set it in front of me, but I only stared at it. I need to see Dr. Wallace, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Samuel placed his hand over mine. I'll go with you. No, I shook my head. I have to do this alone. If we both go, they'll sense something. I need to look like a normal patient. Samuel wanted to protest, but then he nodded with visible worry. I'll wait in the parking lot. If anything happens, you call me immediately. I squeezed his hand. I promise. Dr. Wallace's clinic was in North Lamar, a small 2-story building painted ivory. I once thought it was clean, professional, and safe. But today, looking at the sign, Wallace Family Practice, a sharp ache of betrayal cut through me. Not betrayal from the doctor, but from my son, who dragged him into this. I pushed the door open. The receptionist, Megan, a brown-haired young woman, smiled warmly. Good morning, Mrs. Morris. You're here for your memory follow-up. The question sent a chill down my spine. Follow-up for what? I asked, my tone gentle but sharp. She checked her screen. Oh, the doctor noted mild cognitive concerns a few months ago. Last time, your son... I cut her off. I want to see Dr. Wallace, now. She flinched slightly at my tone, but nodded. Yes, ma'am, room 3. I walked down the familiar hallway. The faint smell of disinfectant made me tense. Dr. Wallace was reviewing charts when I entered. He was in his early 50s, tall, kind-looking, with gray eyes that usually felt reassuring. I didn't feel reassured today. Mrs. Morris, he said, surprised. I didn't see you on today's schedule. I sat down, set my purse on my lap, and looked him straight in the eye. I want to ask about my file. He pushed his glasses up. Yes, your son said you've been forgetful. I have not, I said firmly, and I want to know why my medical record says I'm showing signs of cognitive decline. The room went still. Dr. Wallace stared for a moment, clearly caught off guard. I was relying on information from your family. You're a doctor, not a family stenographer, I said, my voice colder than I expected. And you know very well that diagnosing memory issues without evaluating the patient directly is a serious breach. A flush rose on his cheeks. Your son was very convincing. He said you forgot your way home, left doors unlocked, missed medications. He said the whole family was worried. I leaned back. And you believed everything he said? He avoided my eyes. I thought I was helping your family. They don't need your help. They need your authority to legitimize a plan. I spoke each word slowly, clearly, and by keeping me marked as cognitively impaired, you're helping them. He drew a long breath and set his pen down. I may have let Brandon persuade me too much. I'm sorry, Mrs. Morris. Sorry won't save my life, doctor. I held his gaze. And I want the truth. What exactly did Brandon tell you? He straightened, voice lower now. He said you were confused, easily startled, forgetting relatives, and recently not sleeping. He said sometimes you didn't recognize who was speaking to you. I almost laughed. That has never happened. He looked down. I know. When I see you, you're completely coherent. But he kept insisting, calling the clinic repeatedly. I thought I should document it for monitoring. I didn't imagine. I placed my hand on the desk, stopping him. You're going to fix it, right now. He nodded, stood up, and turned on the printer. I'll print your original file and create a new report. You're fully alert with no signs of cognitive decline. Good. And I want your signature and stamp. He complied. The printer hummed, papers sliding out, each sheet sounding like a piece of my safety returning. When he handed me the documents, I met his eyes. Dr. Wallace, I'm not threatening you, but understand this. If anything happens to me, the police will come to you first, and I'm prepared with everything they'll need. He bowed his head. I understand, and I truly apologize, Mrs. Morris. I stood, slipped the documents into my purse, and walked out. Samuel was waiting in the car. The second I got in, he took my hand. Are you okay? I handed him the folder. It's fixed, but there's more. Samuel sighed, staring out the windshield. I'm afraid things will get even worse. He was right. I could feel it deep in my bones. On the way home, I suggested we stop at the bank, a small branch near Brentwood. I wanted to take care of everything that same day while I still had the strength to face it. The staff member helping us was a middle-aged woman named Karen, round-shouldered with the warm, familiar drawl of someone who'd lived in Texas all her life. Good afternoon, Mrs. Morris. What can I do for you today? I want to check who has access to my account and my husband's, and I want to know if anyone has requested a replacement debit card recently. Karen typed a few lines on her computer. After just a few seconds, her face tightened slightly. Mrs. Morris, last week there was a request to issue a replacement debit card for Mr. Samuel. The reason listed was lost card. The request was submitted from your son's phone number, Brandon Morris. Samuel gripped my hand so tightly I could feel his knuckles trembling. I kept my voice steady. The card was never lost, and we did not authorize that. Karen nodded. I'll revoke the replacement card and lock all access tied to Brandon's secondary account privileges. I spoke slowly, firmly. I want Brandon removed from all access to our accounts. No transfers, no information updates, no card replacements, nothing. Yes, I'll take care of that right away. As Karen processed the paperwork, she looked at us with a sympathetic expression. Is something worrying you today? If you don't mind me asking. I offered a small, tired smile. We just need to regain control of our own finances. Karen nodded and kept typing, then suddenly stopped. Oh, there's one more thing. Brandon has been preparing to open a new life insurance policy for you. The value is quite large. My hand tightened on the armrest. How much? I asked. Karen checked the screen. About $500,000. For a moment, the world tilted. $500,000. Larger than any policy we'd ever signed. Samuel whispered, Helen. But I didn't answer. Every thought in my head collapsed into one terrifying realization. They had been preparing for a long time, step by step. And the worst part? They were doing it with the patience of people chasing one goal, to remove us. I stood up and drew a deep breath. Thank you, Karen. You've helped us more than you know. On the way back to the car, Samuel didn't say a word. He walked beside me, his hand brushing mine now and then, as if reminding me he was still here. I got into the car, closed the door, and in that enclosed space, I finally exhaled the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I turned to Samuel. Sam, this isn't impulsive anymore. This is a full, structured plan. He's prepared everything, from medical records to banking access, even life insurance. Samuel nodded, eyes sad but steady. I know, but Helen, we're still alive, and we still have control. I looked out the window at the Texas sun flashing off the cars in the parking lot. Inside me, fear was slowly hardening into something heavier, stronger, hotter. No longer panic, no longer despair, but determination. I squeezed Samuel's hand. Sam, we're going to fight, all the way. We drove home just as the sun was lifting over the Austin horizon. Morning light dusted the rooftops in a thin gold layer, peaceful and beautiful, if not for the tension stretched in my chest like a string about to snap. We sat in the car a few minutes before going inside. Neither of us spoke, but I knew we were thinking the same thing. Everything was escalating far faster than we imagined. I had just reached for the door handle when the doorbell rang. Samuel flinched. I held his hand to steady him and walked to open the door. Standing on the porch was Lydia. Her hair was tied neatly, makeup light but strained. In her hand was a thick stack of documents inside a plastic folder. She smiled, though the smile didn't reach her eyes. Hi, Mom. I stopped by a little early. There are some important papers you need to sign. If this had been a month earlier, I might have stepped aside and let her in without thinking. But now, every syllable she spoke put me on alert. I tilted my head. What papers are so urgent? Just medical power of attorney forms, Lydia said lightly. In case something happens, the doctor will need someone to sign for you. The way she whispered, something happens, sent a cold shiver down my spine. I opened the door wider. Come in. Lydia froze for half a second. Maybe she expected me to hesitate or look confused, but my calmness seemed to throw her off, even if only briefly. Samuel stood in the living room, eyes sharp as a blade. Lydia nodded politely. Hi, Dad Samuel? Do you have a minute? I just need to explain a few things. Samuel crossed his arms, leaning against the fireplace. Go ahead. I sat on the sofa and patted the spot beside me. Show me the papers. Lydia approached and laid the folder on the table. Her voice dripped with sweetness. You just need to sign here and here. We'll handle the rest. I smiled softly, almost delicately. Before I sign, I want to read everything. If that sentence was a stone dropped into a lake, the ripples on Lydia's face were impossible to miss. She flinched, not much, but enough. Oh, of course, Mom. But there's really no need. It's just standard paperwork. I opened the first page. Samuel immediately stepped closer to read with me. With every page we turned, I saw Lydia's smile tighten a little more. The documents looked professional, polished formatting, smooth language. Anyone skimming would think they were legitimate medical forms, but reading closely, the deception was surgical. On page 2, in the event the patient's unable to make decisions, full authority is granted to primary guardian, Brandon Morris. Next page, if the patient exhibits signs of memory decline, the guardian may approve transfer to a care facility without further authorization. And then the part that made my skin crawl. The guardian may sign on behalf of the patient regarding all treatment decisions, management of medical assets, and welfare-related matters. I closed the folder. Samuel tightened his hand on my shoulder. I looked directly at Lydia, my smile still there, but my eyes sharp as glass. "You expected me to sign this without reading?" Lydia swallowed, eyes flickering. "That's not what I meant. It's just, we're trying to help you." Samuel spoke, voice low and steady. "We're alive and fully competent. We don't need anyone to help us." I reopened the folder, flipping pages deliberately. Lydia watched me like she was trying to calculate whether I was too aware. I leaned back. "Lydia, do you realize what I'm reading? This is the power to control life and death." She gave a nervous laugh. "Oh, Mom, you're exaggerating." "No," I said quietly, but with the weight of a stone. "This gives Brandon complete authority over my medical decisions. Everything, from my medications to where I live, even whether I'm considered mentally sound." Lydia bit her lip. "That's just for emergencies." "Emergencies?" I repeated. "Like the false notes in my medical file, or like the $500,000 life insurance policy he's signing in my name?" Her face went pale. She shot to her feet. I have to get to work. I'm running late. You can just sign later." And she grabbed her bag and nearly tripped over the rug on her way out. The moment the door closed behind her, I slumped into the sofa like someone who had run a marathon. Samuel sat beside me. "You okay?" I nodded, though my hands were still trembling. "They're rushing now, Sam. Really rushing." After a few minutes, I took out my phone, spread the documents on the table, and photographed every page, slowly, carefully, capturing every corner, clause, and signature block. Once done, I sent all the images to Mary, my closest friend from my teaching years, the one person I trusted more than anyone in the extended family. I texted, "Mary, if anything happens to me, give these to the police and don't believe anything Brandon says." Seconds later, Mary called. Her voice shook with anger. "Helen, what is going on? What are they doing to you?" "Mary, I'll explain later," I said, trying to stay calm. "For now, I just need you to keep these copies safe in case I lose my phone." Mary exhaled sharply. "I understand. Helen, you cannot stay alone. I mean it." I looked at Samuel. We exchanged a silent understanding. Mary wasn't being dramatic. She was being realistic. I said, "We're already planning our next steps. If you need me, I'll come right away. Don't hesitate." "I know. Thank you, Mary." When I hung up, I felt a small weight lift off my chest. At least there was one person Brandon hadn't accounted for. "From now on," I told Samuel, "neither of us stays alone. Don't shower with the door locked. Don't sleep unless we're sure everything is safe." Samuel nodded. "I'll call an attorney. Someone independent. No ties to Brandon or his friends." I smiled faintly. "Good. We need protection on all sides." I stood, walked to the window. Outside, the sky was unusually bright after last night's rain. Sunlight danced. along the brick path, making the whole street look freshly washed. But that beauty didn't calm me. I could feel darkness approaching, not the kind that blocks out the sun, but the kind that slips quietly into every decision, every corner of the house, every relationship. And strangely, I felt stronger than ever. No more trembling, no more denial, no more hoping this was just a misunderstanding. Only clarity, only resolve, only the readiness to fight. Samuel wrapped his arm around me, resting his chin gently on my hair. "We're going to get through this, Helen." I leaned my head against his chest, feeling the steady heartbeat of the man who had walked beside me my whole life. "Sam?" I whispered. "I don't know how bad this will get, but I know one thing for sure." He stroked my hand. "What's that?" I opened my eyes and looked out at the flawless blue sky. "They will not touch us again, not ever, no matter what it takes." And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid, not because the danger had passed, but because I knew I was rising, slowly, steadily, step by step. If you're still listening to this story and believe that sometimes a mother's strength begins the moment she stands up and says no, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments, or leave even a few words so I know we're still walking this road together. When Samuel and I stepped into attorney Amelia Brooks's office, I felt as though the tall glass buildings of downtown Austin were leaning toward me. The entire city glittered under the noon sun, peaceful to the point of being surreal, completely opposite of the weight crushing my chest. Samuel had found Amelia through a few old contacts at the Travis County Courthouse. She was in her early 40s with red hair pulled back in a ponytail, sharp eyes softened by warmth. Unlike the cold attorneys you see in movies, she had a way of speaking that made you feel protected, even in the worst circumstances. As soon as we sat down, I opened my bag and laid out every piece of evidence. Photos of the documents, the audio recording from the dinner, the altered medical notes, and the suspicious bank transactions. Amelia went through every page, every line. The more she read, the more serious her expression became. "Mrs. Morris," she said finally, breaking a long silence, "I've handled many cases involving financial fraud and elder abuse, but your situation, this is not ordinary exploitation." My hands grew cold. Amelia placed the stack of papers on the desk. "This is an organized, premeditated operation with a clear timeline, and the ultimate goal is not just money." I raised my eyes to her. Samuel squeezed my hand under the table, as if trying to anchor me. Amelia spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "They are trying to remove you, legally, quietly, without leaving a trace." Samuel's voice cracked. "Oh my God." I inhaled deeply, trying to steady myself. "So what do I do, Amelia? Tell me and I'll do it." She nodded and pulled another set of papers from her drawer. "First, we revoke every power of attorney you and Mr. Samuel ever signed for Brandon. All of it. Leave him with no authority whatsoever." I took the pen. The moment the tip touched the paper, my hand shook so hard I had to pause for several seconds. This wasn't just a signature. This was me cutting the final thread that once connected me and my son. When I finished, Amelia collected the documents and prepared the legal confirmation file. "Now," she continued, "I want the two of you to contact the police immediately, as soon as possible." I blinked. The police? Will they even believe us? "They will," Amelia said firmly, "because you have evidence, a great deal of evidence." Just half an hour later, 2 officers from the Austin Police Department arrived at Amelia's office. One was young and tall, named Officer Reynolds, the other older, calm-eyed, named Officer Sanchez. I told them everything, every detail, every suspicion, every line from the dinner conversation, every document Lydia brought, every suspicious bank transfer. No one interrupted me. No one acted doubtful. Sanchez nodded now and then, jotting notes in his book, while Reynolds reviewed each audio clip I had recorded. When I reached the part where Brandon registered a life insurance policy worth $500,000, both officers exchanged a look. In that moment, I knew this case had moved far beyond suspicion. After I finished, Sanchez closed his notebook and said, "Mrs. Morris, we'll file an emergency report. This is a high-risk situation. We believe they may be preparing to act." I gripped Samuel's hand. My whole body went cold. Reynolds added, "We need to install covert surveillance cameras in your home, and we need both of you to stay somewhere else for now. The sooner, the better." Samuel asked, "What can they do? I mean, can't you arrest them right now?" Sanchez shook his head. "If we arrest them now, they'll deny everything. And once they erase their tracks, we'll lose evidence. The goal is to catch them in the act, record them trespassing, tampering, or attempting something dangerous." My throat tightened. "So, how much time do we have?" Officer Reynolds looked straight into my eyes. "Not much, Mrs. Morris, but enough to stay ahead." That afternoon, we returned home under police supervision. 3 technicians carried large bags filled with equipment, small black boxes, thin wires, and tiny cameras, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. They placed cameras in the living room, kitchen, hallway, back patio, and even near the electrical panel, nowhere left uncovered. Sanchez told me, "These cameras don't just record. They capture audio and notify us immediately if there's unusual movement. If they plan anything, we'll be there." I nodded, though it felt like someone was squeezing my heart. This was no longer a vague fear. This was a real race between us and our own child. After they finished, Sanchez said, "You and Mr. Samuel should leave the house now. Check into a hotel, somewhere discreet. We'll monitor everything." I packed a few clothes, essential papers, and left everything else exactly as it was, like we were stepping out to run errands. We locked the door. I looked back at the house as if leaving behind a piece of my life. In the car, Samuel wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "Hell, you did well. We're still safe." I nodded, though my eyes stung. We chose a small, quiet hotel near Round Rock, private, unremarkable, nothing Brandon would suspect. Samuel booked the room under his name, and I turned off all phone location services. That night, when the hotel door closed and the hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, fear finally hit me full force. I sat on the bed, fingers laced tightly together. "Sam," I whispered, "I know we're doing the right thing, but I never imagined needing police protection from my own son." Samuel lowered himself beside me. "I never imagined it either, but this is reality now." I leaned my head on his shoulder. I remember him at 3 years old, crying for me every night. I remember his graduation. I remember his wedding day. Sam, how can a child do something like this? Samuel didn't answer immediately. After a long moment, he simply took my hand, grounding me with his presence. People change, Helen, sometimes from ambition, sometimes from debt, sometimes because someone pushes them. But whatever the reason, we need to survive. I closed my eyes. Yes, we have to survive. Around 9 p.m., my phone vibrated. Brandon was calling. My heart pounded. Samuel whispered, "Stay calm, he'll be testing you." I inhaled deeply and picked up. "Hi, Mom." Brandon's voice was unusually cheerful. "I stopped by the house, but you weren't home." I kept my tone steady. "Oh, your dad and I are taking a short trip. Needed a little break." "Oh, really?" His tone faltered for a split second. He was calculating. I added, "Yes, I've been tired. Just resting." He shifted into his familiar, concerned son voice. "Did you take your medicine and remember your appointment on Tuesday?" That moment I heard clearly, just like at dinner. The questions weren't care, they were tests. I smiled weakly, though he couldn't see it. "Yes, I remember." Brandon chuckled softly. "Good. Rest well. I'll call tomorrow." When I hung up, Samuel stared at me. Did he suspect anything? Not yet, but our time is running out. I looked out the hotel window. The Texas night stretched wide, highway lights glowing like scattered embers. Beautiful, yet foreign. A part of me felt like collapsing, but another part, stronger now, kept rising. I remembered what Sanchez told us. "We will catch him in the act." That sentence comforted me and terrified me all at once. I took a slow breath, staring at my hands that had raised a child, only for that child to now plot to end my life. Inside me was a storm: fear, grief, shock, anger. But beneath it all was a small, stubborn ember. Hope. Hope that the truth would come out. Hope that justice would stand with us. Hope that Samuel and I would survive this storm. And more than anything, hope that no matter how many times my heart broke, I would still rise. I had just set down my cup of tea when my phone buzzed again. Brandon. Samuel looked up. "Stay steady, Helen, he's probing." I nodded, inhaled, and answered. "Hi, Mom," Brandon said. Still sweet, but now I heard tension. "Where did you and Dad go without saying anything?" I forced a smile. "Oh, I told you, we're taking a short break." "Where?" Too fast. "Not far," I said evenly. "I've been tired, so we're resting. Why? Did you stop by the house?" "I stopped by yesterday," he replied, each word deliberate. No one was home. The door was locked, but the hallway light was on. A chill ran down my spine. He was checking whether we were lying. I let out a soft laugh. "Oh, I must have forgotten to turn it off. Getting old, you know." Samuel frowned slightly, but I had to keep up the act. Brandon paused, then replied with an overly cheerful tone. "I have a surprise for you and Dad. I'll head over to the house and wait. When are you coming back?" My blood turned cold. I kept my voice light. "Maybe tomorrow afternoon, I'm not sure." "Perfect," he said. "I'll get things ready." I froze. "Ready for what?" "A surprise, Mom," he chuckled. "You'll love it." My heart hammered. I knew exactly the kind of surprise it could be. After he hung up, I whispered, "Sam, he's going to the house. He's preparing something." Samuel immediately stood, trying to reassure me by sheer presence. "It's okay. Police are ready. They want to catch him in the act." Right then, Samuel's phone rang. Officer Reynolds. He put it on speaker. "We've been monitoring the call," Reynolds said. "Brandon is heading to your house. Don't worry, we have units watching." My breath shook. "Officer, will he hurt anyone? Are you sure no one else is in danger?" "Don't worry," Reynolds replied. "We will protect you, and this may be our chance to confirm everything." I nodded, though fear dragged at my ribs. I never imagined a day where I waited for police to arrest my own son. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. It was Officer Sanchez. Steady, calm. "Mrs. Morris. He's inside the house." My body went rigid. Samuel gripped my hand tightly. "We're recording everything," Sanchez said. "I'll describe what's happening so you're informed." I tried to breathe evenly. "Yes, I'm listening." Sanchez spoke slowly, clearly giving me time to endure the truth. Brandon used the spare key hidden under the planter. No forced entry. He walked in like it was his home. I closed my eyes. We'd kept that spare key there for nearly 20 years, never thinking the person who used it to betray us would be our son. "He's looking around," Sanchez continued, checking the living room, kitchen, both bedrooms. He's calling out, "Mom, Dad," but not sincerely. My stomach twisted. He brought a large plastic bag. The camera on the bookshelf caught it clearly. Inside, a bottle of red wine, a blister pack of pills, and one unmarked bottle. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a sob. Samuel rubbed my back gently. Sanchez continued. He poured wine into 2 glasses, very carefully. Then he crushed the pills and mixed them into your glass. For a moment, my heart stopped. Samuel whispered, "My God." Sanchez added, "That's not ordinary sleeping medication. Our forensic team believes this dosage could cause respiratory failure." My whole body trembled. I had to hold on to Samuel to stay upright. "He hid the bottle inside your bathroom cabinet," Sanchez went on. "The hidden camera caught everything. Next, he took out a small black device. It looks like a mini recorder or tracker." A shiver crawled down my spine. "He placed it under the kitchen table, right where you usually sit for breakfast." Sanchez's sigh crackled through the line. "Helen, you're incredibly strong. Most mothers would collapse watching this." I let out a broken, tearful laugh. "Officer, I think I'm breaking in half." "We also recorded him calling Lydia," he said. He told her, "Tonight is a good time." We don't know exactly what that means, but it confirms she's involved. My stomach twisted painfully. Samuel muttered, "He really planned everything." I whispered through the tightness in my chest, "Officer Sanchez, please let me see the video." "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "It's going to hurt." I swallowed. "That's my son. I have to see." They sent the footage through a secure email. Samuel helped open it on the laptop. In the small, quiet hotel room, with the hum of the air conditioner and the muted glow of the lamp, the video began to play. And there he was, Brandon, walking into our house, calm, comfortable, as if he were doing something completely ordinary. I watched him pour the wine, crush the pills, sharpen every movement, not a tremor, not a moment of hesitation. I watched him open the medicine cabinet, hide the overdose pills inside, then adjust the bottle exactly as if no one had touched it. I watched him attach a tiny camera under the kitchen table, then step back to admire it, like a craftsman adding the final detail to a meticulously planned project. I watched everything with the eyes of someone who had nowhere left to hide. Every second, every frame cut into me like a blade. Eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore. My hand slipped off the laptop. My body went weak, collapsing right onto the hotel floor. Samuel rushed to hold me. I cried without sound. Everything I had bottled up for more than a week, fear, pain, betrayal, exploded like a dam breaking. Then the police called again. Reynolds spoke in a firm, unwavering voice. "Mrs. Morris, we have all the evidence. We're requesting an emergency arrest warrant right now." Samuel looked at me. I looked at him. We weren't happy. We weren't relieved. We weren't even calmer. There was only a hollow, icy emptiness. But deep down, I knew this was inevitable. When we hung up, Samuel pressed his forehead against mine. "You didn't do anything wrong, Helen. Don't blame yourself." I shook my head, tears still streaking down my cheeks. "Sam, that was once the baby I carried in my arms. I thought if I just loved him enough, he would know right from wrong. But he's gone too far." Samuel held my hand. "You loved him enough. but no one can save a person who doesn't want to save himself. I didn't answer. I just stared out the hotel window. The Austin night sky glittered with city lights like thousands of eyes watching, and in the middle of those distant lights, I realized I was no longer the trembling, frightened woman I had been. I was scared. Of course I was scared, but inside that fear was something rising, strong, quiet, stubborn, not for revenge, not for pride, but to live, to protect Samuel, to protect myself, to make sure people like Brandon and Lydia would never hurt anyone again. I placed my hand over my chest, my heart beat, shaking, but still fighting. I whispered to myself, "You're still here, Helen. You haven't lost." And that was the only thing keeping me standing in the storm ahead. The police update came faster than I expected. 3 hours after their last call, Samuel and I were told to return to Austin, to a discreet location where officers could protect us but still allow me to witness the final step. A part of me wanted to flee, not face what was coming, but another part, wounded yet braver, needed to confront it. Late that afternoon, we sat in an unmarked police vehicle parked not far from the house. Outside, the branches of old oak trees cast long shadows across the street like fading ink strokes. I sat in the back seat, fingers interlocked, eyes fixed on the small gate at the front of our home. Officer Sanchez turned slightly in his seat. "They'll be back before dark. Just stay still. You're safe." I nodded, even though my chest felt like it was being squeezed. Samuel rested a warm hand on my back, the only thing keeping me upright. Around 6 p.m., the familiar gray SUV slowed down and stopped right in front of our house. Brandon got out first, wearing a dark blue shirt and carrying a gym bag. Lydia followed him, half her face covered by a mask, but I recognized her tense posture instantly. Over the police radio, I heard Reynolds say, "Teams 1 and 2, stand by. Wait for my signal." Brandon scanned the area like a predator. I trembled as I watched him put the key into the lock and walk into our home as if it belonged to him. Lydia slipped in behind. Sanchez murmured, "They think you're coming back tonight. They want to clean up evidence, retrieve their things, and finish whatever they started." Samuel squeezed my hand. "You don't have to watch, Helen." But I couldn't look away. 15 minutes later, the front door swung open again. Brandon walked out first, carrying a larger bag, filled with things I didn't want to imagine. Lydia followed, whispering, "Hurry up, Brandon, don't let anyone see." Police closed in instantly. "APD, hands up!" The shout shook the entire quiet neighborhood. Brandon froze. He dropped the bag. Lydia screamed. Uniformed officers moved in from both sides of the street, and 3 patrol cars lit up with blue and red lights. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, too frightened to step outside. Brandon stood paralyzed for a moment, then turned toward the house, as if to run. He didn't get a single step in. 2 officers grabbed his arms and pinned him. "Do not resist. You are under arrest for attempted murder and premeditated poisoning." Lydia sobbed. Footsteps scrambled. Handcuffs clattered. Every sound struck my chest like a hammer. Samuel turned to me, voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to see this, Helen. You don't." But I still watched. I needed to. I needed to know I hadn't imagined everything. A female officer opened our car door. "Mrs. Morris, would you like to step out and see from closer? We'll keep you safe." I inhaled deeply. Yes. Samuel hesitated but followed me, standing close as if guarding me from the world. When I stepped out of the car, Brandon was being led toward a patrol car. He lifted his head, and that look... Good God, that look will haunt me for the rest of my life. Not remorse, not fear, but hatred. As if I had betrayed him. as if my survival was an offense. "Mom," he snarled. "Mom, why did you do this? You ruined everything." A small cracking line opened inside my heart, not because of what he said, but because of how he looked at me, like an enemy. I answered softly but clearly, "You did this to yourself, Brandon, not me." He turned away, let out a bitter, twisted laugh. "You'll regret this. You don't know anything." An officer pushed him into the patrol car and slammed the door so hard the window rattled. Lydia stood nearby, handcuffed, sobbing. When she saw me, she broke down harder. "Helen, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would go this far." I looked at her. No rage, no pity, just a calm, dark clarity, as if I were staring at a pool of black water I had finally climbed out of. Reynolds spoke, sharply to her. "If you want to talk, you'll be interviewed separately, but you must tell the full truth, right now." Lydia nodded, shaking all over. We were taken to the station to finalize reports and receive initial forensic updates. The beige walls, the smell of stale coffee, the bright white lights, they all made the room feel cold, as if I were sitting inside my own judgment day. A female forensic officer entered with a thin folder. "Mrs. Morris, we tested the wine and the remaining pills found in your home." I straightened instinctively, though my hands were numb. The amount mixed into your glass was enough to cause death within a few hours. The world around me froze. She continued gently. "We also tested your hair, as your lawyer requested. There are signs you've been poisoned in small doses for at least 3 to 5 weeks. I touched my hair as if I could feel the toxins woven through each strand. "What about Samuel?" I asked immediately. "He has no signs of poisoning." I exhaled shakily, half relief, half despair. So the plan had been aimed at me first. Samuel was just someone they wanted out of the way. The officer added quietly, "We believe Lydia was drawn into it. She's asking for a separate case file and is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence." I asked, "And Brandon?" Reynolds answered for her. "He denies everything, says it's all a misunderstanding. Says you made it up, says the cameras are fake." I let out a tired, aching laugh. Cameras can be fake, but his eyes weren't. Samuel placed a hand on my back. I leaned into him slightly, feeling like I had survived a massive storm, but knowing it wasn't the last. I whispered, "Brandon isn't the child I raised anymore. He's become someone else." Not spoken to blame, but as a farewell to the best parts of a memory I once held dear. When we stepped out of the station that night, Austin was covered in a thin layer of mist. Streetlights glowed softly on the pavement like lonely streaks of gold. I stood there, breathing in deeply. Through all the pain and emptiness, I felt one truth. I had survived, and sometimes survival is the very first victory. 2 days after the arrest, Samuel and I were called back to the station for new information. I thought I was prepared, but the moment I stepped into that small beige room again, the unease rushed over me like a flood. Officer Sanchez, Attorney Amelia Brooks, and a young female officer waited for us. A thick file and an open laptop sat on the table. When Amelia met my eyes, I knew the truth would be even worse than I imagined. Amelia began speaking slowly. Lydia had confessed. She admitted Brandon initiated the poisoning idea after being refused financial help by us. Hearing that sentence felt like someone tore a piece of my heart out. I knew my son had changed, but to hear he had said the words, "I want my mother gone so I can get the money," sooner, I had never imagined it. But Amelia explained Lydia only told half the truth. She claimed Brandon came up with most of the plan. Then the investigation uncovered Lydia's real past. Sanchez turned the laptop toward me. Lydia wasn't her real name. She once lived in Wyoming under another identity, Anna Whitmore. And under that name, she had been involved in the suspicious death of an elderly woman she cared for. That woman rewrote her will to leave most of her estate to Anna, then died a few months later. Not enough evidence. Case closed. And Anna vanished, only to reappear in Austin as Lydia, my daughter-in-law. My shoulders went cold. Part of me, the mother in me, wanted to protect my son, but the older, wiser woman inside me saw the truth clearly. Brandon wasn't just wrong for listening to Lydia. He had been pulled into the orbit of a dangerous predator. The young female officer pushed another stack of papers toward me. These were recovered from Lydia's laptop. Detailed notes, step by step, line by line, a blueprint. Small doses weekly to weaken the victim. Mix with wine to mask bitterness. Do not use same method on husband. Remove him later. After completion, use power of attorney to extract assets. And then the lines that froze my blood entirely. Brandon is easy to manipulate. After assets are secured, eliminate risk. Cut him loose. I looked up, my voice cracking. Cut him loose. Does that mean she planned to get rid of Brandon too? Sanchez nodded gravely. That is our belief. She had a 2-layer plan. You weren't the only target. I turned to Samuel. He shook his head slowly, grief etched into every line of his face. Then Sanchez delivered what I least expected. Brandon had broken down in his cell. When he heard Lydia confess to reduce her sentence, he tried to take his own life. Officers intervened in time. He was now under suicide watch. My body trembled. Samuel placed a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to see him, Helen. You've endured enough. But something heavy and immovable sat inside me. No, I need to see him. I need to hear him say it. The visitation room was colder than I expected. Bright white lights washed everything flat and sterile. Brandon sat in a corner, head in his hands. When the door opened, he looked up, and his eyes were emptier than any moment of his life I had ever witnessed. I stood close to the glass, close enough to see each breath he took. Brandon, I whispered. He stared a moment. Mom, why did you come? I clenched my hands. To hear the truth from you. Brandon let out a laugh, crooked, broken. The truth? You already know it. Say it, I replied. Tell me why. He hung his head for a long time, then finally spoke in a drained, lifeless voice. Because I wanted the money. I was tired of waiting for you and Dad to leave anything behind. I wanted an easier life. Lydia told me I deserved more, and I believed her. And then, I couldn't stop. I bit my lip to keep from collapsing. You call trying to kill your parents something you couldn't stop? Silence. I looked into his eyes and saw it clearly. The boy I once held, fed, comforted, fought for, was gone. The person staring back at me now was a stranger. I turned my back and walked toward the door. Mom! Brandon called out, his voice rough and cracking. Mom, do you still love me? I stopped. I didn't turn around. I didn't let him see my tears. I only answered slowly, one word at a time. I will always love the child I gave birth to. But you are no longer that child. The steel door closed behind me with a heavy sound, like the final verdict. Samuel was waiting in the hallway. The moment he saw me step out, he opened his arms and pulled me close. I collapsed against his shoulder and let my tears fall. 30 years of motherhood pouring out in one storm. You did so well, Samuel whispered, his voice gentle as a breeze. You've done everything a mother could possibly do. I choked out. My heart. It's shattered, Sam. He held me tighter. I'll help you put it back together, piece by piece. I'm right here. In the arms of the man who has walked beside me for nearly my entire life, I realized that even though everything around me was collapsing, even though the truth had stripped people bare in ways I never wanted to see, I still had one thing to hold on to: Samuel's quiet, steady love. And that was the only thing keeping me standing in the brutal storm my son and his wife had dragged into our lives. After the first preliminary hearing, life didn't return to normal the way I once hoped. My feet still moved and my heart still beat, but every morning when I woke up, there was a large emptiness in the house, a silence not of peace but of loss. I realized we couldn't stay in the home that held both our happiest memories and the pain that nearly killed us. It took me almost a week before I finally told Samuel over dinner, "Sam, I think we should sell the house." He put down his fork and looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether I was speaking out of emotion or true resolve. When he saw I wasn't wavering, he simply nodded, fully, without hesitation. "If that's what you need to breathe again, we'll do it right away. No arguments, no questions, just the trust of a man who has walked half a lifetime with me." We contacted a real estate agent, and within 2 weeks, the house was on the market. When the agent first came to see it, I stood in the living room and watched the afternoon light wash over familiar things. The wedding photo, Samuel's leather chair where he always read the paper, the old wooden cabinet I polished with my own hands. Everything glowed golden, like the sunset of a life already past. On the day we signed the contract, my hands shook more than they did in the jail visitation room. Neighbors came by with flowers and homemade bread. Some others kept their distance, fearful of the media frenzy. I didn't blame them. The news was everywhere, so loud that even going out for a cup of coffee meant being recognized. Some headlines hurt more than the doctor's diagnosis. Elderly couple miraculously survives son's poisoning plot. Every article was a fresh cut. Even when we didn't read them, the stories followed us like a shadow. Samuel and I moved into a small apartment in North Austin, near a park where people walked their dogs in the evenings and rode bikes around the lake. The place had only 2 bedrooms, but it was bright, quiet, and, most importantly, free of memories. No ghosts of the past lived in those new walls. That alone made it precious. After settling in, the first thing I did was undergo a full medical checkup. The results made the doctor sigh. My body showed clear signs of low-dose poisoning over several weeks, but thankfully my liver and kidneys weren't severely damaged. I was prescribed detox medication, vitamins, and regular follow-ups. When we left the hospital, I held Samuel's hand tightly. He said softly, "We made it through, one step at a time." But physical recovery was only part of it. What happened inside my mind was heavier. I became afraid of the dark, afraid of the sound of keys turning in a lock, afraid of the smell of red wine, afraid of doctor's appointments. Many nights I woke up with my heart pounding so hard it felt like an alarm going off. Samuel had to hold me until I calmed down. We began therapy with Dr. Ellis, a middle-aged man with a gentle voice and eyes that truly listened. He told us wounds inflicted by family have their own unique depth, deeper and more persistent than any other kind of pain. We saw him once a week. At first, I could only cry over the betrayal, the shame, the helplessness of not realizing what was happening right under my roof. Over time, I learned to name my feelings, to revisit the memories without collapsing, and most importantly, to let go. As months passed, Lydia and Brandon's case went to trial. Justice isn't perfect, but this time it stood firmly on our side. Lydia's past in Wyoming resurfaced. When the police presented her detailed notes, travel records, and the undeniable similarities between her past victims, the jury was stunned into silence. She received the harshest sentence the law allowed. No one dared meet her eyes as she was taken away. And Brandon, he was convicted of premeditated attempted murder, with a long sentence ahead of him, years behind bars. When the judge read the verdict, I bowed my head, not out of joy, not out of satisfaction, but because my heart never imagined it would witness such a thing. The night after the verdict, I went home carrying a weight like a stone in my chest. I took out a small notebook I had bought from a shop nearby, a light blue one with simple maple leaves on the cover. I started writing. Everything. What happened? What hurt? What terrified me at night? The rare peaceful moments when Samuel and I sat by the window watching people stroll through the park below. Writing didn't erase the pain, but it helped me hold myself together. Sometimes I wrote for hours, sometimes only a few lines. But that notebook became a place to lay down burdens too heavy to carry alone. Every night before bed, Samuel would remind me in a soft, almost lullaby-like voice, "Helen, we still have each other. That's enough." I knew those words couldn't erase a storm, but they were a life jacket, enough to keep me afloat. Some days I stood on the balcony watching the city below, feeling the breeze stir my hair. Sometimes I thought about Brandon, the little boy who once ran giggling across the yard, who beamed when I bought him his first pair of school shoes. I didn't know whether that feeling was love or the lingering shape of a wound not fully healed, but I accepted it as part of my journey. Our new life wasn't perfect, but it was slowly forming, and every morning, when I opened the window to let the sunlight spill into our small apartment, I felt myself living again, not as a victim, but as someone rising, slowly but surely. Time passed more slowly than I expected. Week after week, I went to therapy, wrote in my blue notebook, followed the doctor's instructions, and learned how to breathe again. But there was one thing I continued avoiding: visiting Brandon. The last time I saw him, broken in that holding cell after Lydia betrayed him, haunted me for weeks. Yet somewhere deep inside, it felt like I was dragging behind me a door left half open. You can't live forever with a half-open door. Eventually, you must close it or face what's behind it. One afternoon, while Samuel poured hot tea, I looked at him and said, "Sam, I think it's time I go see Brandon." He set the cup down, as if he'd known all along this day would come. "If you're ready, I'll go with you." We applied for visitation and were scheduled for the following week. That entire week, I felt like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether the fall would hurt more or heal more. The day arrived. Austin's sky was gray and cold. When we drove through the prison gates, my chest tightened. The tall gray walls stretching across the landscape felt like a harsh reminder. Some choices lead to a life with no exits. We went through security and were led into the visitation room. The click of keys, the groan of metal doors, each sound pushed my heart deeper into my ribs. I sat at the table, hands folded to hide the trembling. Brandon was brought in a few minutes later. I had prepared myself, and still I wasn't prepared. He was thin, hollow cheeks, sunken eyes, dark circles like bruises under them. Even his gaze, once fiery, full of life, was now a dull, exhausted gray. The loose prison uniform made him look smaller, as if all his ambition and pride had been stripped away, leaving only a lost child inside a grown man's shell. He hesitated when he saw me, then sat down. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, weak, nothing like the man who once glared at me with hatred on the day of his arrest. I took a slow breath. "Brandon." We sat in silence for a few seconds. The only sounds were the hum of the vent above and the guard's pen scratching on his clipboard. Finally, Brandon spoke. "I'm sorry." I blinked. I had imagined this moment many times, but when the words finally came, they hurt more than I expected. He went on, voice breaking. "I'm sorry for everything, for what I did, for what I let her do, for turning you into someone I wanted gone. I can't forgive myself." I stayed still. There's a kind of pain no words can express, a pain that only comes from the confession of your own child. "Brandon," I said softly, "what you did can never be forgotten, and I won't pretend things will ever be the same." He nodded, eyes red. "But," I continued, "I don't want to live the rest of my life hating you. I can't carry that forever. I won't forget, but I won't let hatred consume me." Brandon lowered his head, shoulders trembling. It was the first time I'd seen him cry like a child since he was 10. After a while, he caught his breath and said, "I want to start over. They have a vocational program here. I signed up for electrical repair. I want to learn something real. If I ever get another chance, I want to try to live decently." I looked at him. Despite all the destruction, despite Lydia's manipulation, despite his own choices, I saw a faint flicker of something human, something old and fragile but still alive. I nodded. "If you want to start over, do it. Not for me, not for your father. Do it for yourself." We talked a little longer about therapy, his eating habits, how he was trying to rebuild his strength. Somehow, those small conversations made the room feel less unbearably heavy. When the guard announced time was up, Brandon stood, hesitated, looked at me as if searching for something else to say, but only whispered, "Mom, thank you for coming." I didn't answer. I just looked at him. Not with full forgiveness, not with hatred, just the gaze of a mother who knows love can't save someone, but still can't let go completely. When he disappeared behind the metal door, my legs nearly gave out. Samuel immediately steadied me and guided me outside. In the car, he held me close. "You did what so many people couldn't, Helen. It takes courage to face the child who hurt you this deeply." I leaned into him, listening to the heartbeat of the man who carried me through every upheaval of my life. It was steady, grounding, and it helped my own fragile heartbeat find a little calm. On the drive home, Austin's lights passed by through the windows, restaurants, small shops, street lamps, all familiar, yet somehow the entire city felt different. Still the same place, but I wasn't the same woman. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my blue notebook. For the first time in weeks, my hand didn't shake as I wrote. I described the prison visit, every look, every word, every tremor in my heart. Writing it down felt like setting down a weight I had carried too far. On the last line of the night, I wrote something I never thought I'd be able to say. The wound may never fully heal, but I believe I still have hope. When I put the pen down, I felt lighter, not healed, not free of pain, but lighter. Samuel came to place a hand on my shoulder. "We still have each other, Helen. That's enough." I looked into the eyes that had walked with me through every storm. "Yes," I said, "it's enough for me to keep going." Outside the window, the Austin night was quiet. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a small piece of peace returning. 4 years have passed since the trial ended, and my life has settled into a calm that sometimes still feels unfamiliar to me. Mornings in our small apartment in North Austin no longer begin with my heart racing from nightmares, but with the smell of the coffee Samuel brews, the radio playing gentle classical music, or the sound of the wind brushing against the window. I never thought I would feel this kind of peace again, especially after everything I went through, but life has a quiet, persistent way of returning things we once believed were gone forever. The apartment is small but warm enough to hold 2 lives that have already worn down at the edges. The balcony faces a park where every afternoon I see older people taking slow walks, elderly couples holding hands as they move step by step. Samuel and I began adopting that habit as well. Every day we walk for about an hour and rest on an old wooden bench under the oak tree. Sometimes Samuel tells me about a book he just read, or a dish he wants to learn to cook for me. I often laugh because he has said that same thing hundreds of times in our 40 years of marriage. But every time he says it, it softens something inside me. When my health fully recovered, Samuel and I started joining community activities for seniors. I never imagined that one day I would stand in front of a room full of older people to talk about finances, legal rights, and especially vigilance. But what happened to me made me understand that so many people need to hear these things from someone of their own generation, not a distant professional. Every time I stand up to share my story, the room goes quiet. I see eyes filled with shock, pain, and even tears. I always emphasize that the scariest threat is not a stranger on the street, but the family member beside us when they wear a mask too perfect to question. I tell them that a single signature, one piece of paper, one misplaced trust, can change an entire life. And that sometimes being cautious is not a lack of love. It's a way to protect the very love we have. I never mention Brandon's name in those meetings, but I talk about betrayal. I don't describe Lydia in detail, but I talk about people who can pose as family to exploit the vulnerability of the elderly. I don't want my story to become a tragedy told just for pity. I want it to be a mirror, painful, yes, but one that helps others avoid the same fall. Still, not every day is a strong day. Some nights when the city has fallen asleep, I still think about Brandon. Not with anger, but with the regret of a mother who once dreamed of a different life for her child. But I no longer let that pain swallow me. I allow it to exist, but I don't allow it to lead the rest of my life. Many people have asked me, what helped you stand up after everything? I always say it wasn't one thing. It was many small things woven together. Samuel's patience, Attorney Amelia's dedication, Officer Sanchez and the investigation team's determination, my therapist's gentle guidance, and the quiet mornings with a warm cup of tea. I am grateful to all of them. If not for their hands pulling me from the edge, I would not be standing here telling this story. Some people say, "You were lucky," but I simply shake my head. I don't call it luck. I call it survival. Survival is its own kind of victory. It's when you're still standing after a storm that could have swept everything away. It's when you can look back at your past without trembling. It's when a heart that once shattered finds a way to beat again, slowly, softly, but still beating. Now, every morning when I open the window and let the sunlight spill in, I feel something clear and certain. I am still alive and living stronger than ever. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've learned to live with the scar without letting it take control. I don't know how many people will hear my story, but if even one person out there, just one, finds the courage to protect themselves or becomes alert enough to recognize the warning signs around them, then everything I endured was not in vain. This afternoon, as Samuel and I sat in the park, the wind playing with our hair, I looked at him and whispered, "Sam, we made it through something most people can't even imagine." He smiled and squeezed my hand. "Yes, we made it through, and we still have each other." I looked up at Austin's wide sky. I don't know what challenges the future holds, but I know this. My heart, though once shattered, has been pieced back together, and it will keep beating, keep loving, keep living, because I survived, and because I still want to live. As you, who have listened until this very moment, reach the end of my story, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. This journey has not been easy, and having someone walk through it with me makes me feel far less alone. If you're still here and something in my story has touched you, please tell me where you're watching from in the comments below, or share a thought. Just one sentence is enough. I would truly appreciate it. And if you'd like to stay with me for future stories, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. Your presence is a gift far greater than any thank you I could ever put into words.